Dr. Kingsley Makhubela has had a distinguished career as a South African diplomat, including holding the position of Chief of Protocol at the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. He's now the Director of Risk Recon that focuses on international peace and security. So, who better to discuss the impact of Donald Trump winning a second term as President of the United States on South Africa and Africa? Well, welcome to National Security News, Dr. Kingsley, Dr. Makhubela. Sorry, I know you very well, so I find it hard to call you doctor.
Well, thank you very much, Linda. You know, the election of Donald Trump as president of the US has the potential actually to fundamentally transform conflict situations around the world. There are two areas that have been really nagging the international community: the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the conflict between Israel and Palestine. But Donald Trump had made it clear during the campaign that as soon as he moves into the White House, he would like to stop both wars. Mm-hmm. If we were to really put some level of credence in what he's saying, there's a possibility that all these tensions that we're seeing and all this talk of a possible third world war may disappear. He has made it quite clear that he doesn't want to see the third world war, meaning the world war that will be triggered as a result of the tension in the Ukraine, triggered between the US and the Russian Federation. So if we're to go by that, Linda, I think we have the possibility to see Donald Trump really changing things in the world. Will he be able to do that? He now has the majority in Congress. He now has a majority in the Senate. So he has a good chance that both sides of Pennsylvania are controlled by the single party. So we'd hope that he would transform the world for the better.
Sure, but what about Africa? I mean, he has said pretty derogatory stuff about Africa, and I'm quoting directly there. He called it shithole countries. I mean, so how should Africa see this?
Well, Donald Trump has had, during his first term as president, he did not have a clear policy to deal with challenges facing Africa. And that is much better than really dictating what Africa has to do, which we've seen during the Biden administration. The Biden administration came up with a strategic document for sub-Saharan Africa. And that document really speaks about how Africa should conform to the US foreign policy. And anything outside the US foreign policy, it's seen as a bad thing. You know, they've come up with this thing of them and us. But during the term of Donald Trump, we've never seen any dictation of foreign policy into the continent. He's had no interest. But that may likely change, Linda, given the fact that now there's a big demand for strategic mineral resources coming out of Africa. He may want to have access to these resources because he's competing with China for the access of these resources mainly. So he may change his policy position, but we've never seen a policy position that will raise concern about how he deals with Africa. The fact that he called Africa a shithole, it means he doesn't care about it. He does not care about what's going on, because if it wasn't a shithole, he wouldn't really develop concrete policy to support his stance on that.
Well, at the moment, there is concern that China and Russia are moving into Africa more, well, for the critical minerals, as you say, and they're propping up some governments. So do you think that might prompt more engagement of the US in Africa?
Well, you know, Linda, there's tension now about the multipolarity that is starting to emerge, different centers of power around the world. And the United States remains a very critical power. But there are new powers that are emerging. China is a big power. Russia is a big power. Iran is becoming a big power. There are other developing countries that are exercising their power. But the definition of power now is changing. The power of influence we've seen within the General Assembly, that a large number of developing countries are taking positions that are contrary to the US policy. So it's changing the definition of power. It's no longer the ability to get and do what you want, but it's the ability to bargain with those who are having a power to support, a power to take independent position. So there's a need for the exchange of this power relation that we're starting to see emerging. So Donald Trump may definitely change policies. I think he must be judged on the basis of his policy, not on the basis of the fear that people are trying to project about him.
So let's talk about AGOA. South Africa wants it to continue, and South Africa wants to ensure it's included, and it was worried about that. I mean, envoys were sent to Washington to talk about that. Do you think Donald Trump? Or the fear is real that Donald Trump might exclude South Africa from AGOA.
Well, again, we want to go to the track record. During the 4th year that he was at the White House, there was not even a talk of the possibility of AGOA being terminated. He's never made such statement. The possibility of termination actually came from the Biden administration and the Democrats in the House and the Senate. They are the ones who have been advocating for this. They are, of course, using AGOA as an instrument of cohesion. Donald Trump, despite the fact that a lot of people have no respect for his diplomatic prowess, but he's shown some diplomatic skills in terms of negotiating, even with the most difficult countries like North Korea. He's shown the ability to reach out and really negotiate. Based on his track record, Linda, we are likely to see Donald Trump that is open for negotiation and open for persuasion. He's used, of course, he's a shrewd business person. He has used his skills to negotiate with NATO as an example, to get member states in Europe to make a fair contribution in terms of their own defense. So Donald Trump must be seen within the context of his ability to be able to negotiate and negotiate successfully for his country. But he's going to meet people who are equally keen on negotiating for their own country. The question is, how is Donald Trump going to meet particularly developing countries, and Africa in particular, halfway? So we'll see how his administration will fare in that respect.
Well, you've been a diplomat for a long time. How do you think African nations should negotiate with, with Washington, with Trump there, for a good position for them?
Of course, the fact that the United States is not the only primary power in the international space, that of course the United States is keen to have an influence around African countries, that is going to work to the advantage of Africans. Of course, again, Linda, that the fact that Africans have better access to strategic mineral resources is going to work in the interest of Africa. I mean, take, for instance, a country like Namibia that produces 11% of the world's uranium. And this uranium is quite critical and key for the US energy sector. The United States currently buys close to 16% of its enriched uranium from Russia. And the Biden administration came up in the last 2 months with sanctions on Russia in this respect, but gave the Department of Energy in the United States the ability to deviate from the sanction and continue to access this uranium. Again, the United States is getting its raw uranium, about 70% from Kazakhstan, which is very much aligned with the Russians. So there are a lot of bargaining tools that African can use in their negotiations with the American. Of course, this is a give and take, Linda. So the Africans would have to determine what are the issues that they are willing to do away with and issues that are so dear to Africans that they won't be able to part with, and what they expect from the United States. One of the issues is better negotiations of this AGOA. AGOA, it benefits the United States also. It's not a one-way stream. It benefits the United States. So we'd have to see how is he going to deal with this. Of course, he's raised concern, for instance, that he's going to impose certain tariffs in countries like Mexico, which is the major trading partner of the United States. Is he going to do that, or is going to be a pragmatic approach in the development of his policy? We need to see the policy that he's going to come up with and judge him on the basis of his policy. I'm not one of those people who are really being coerced to accept that there's some level of fear that Donald Trump poses to the world and to international peace and security. I haven't seen that. To the contrary, this is a man who has made it quite clear that he wants to stop some of those conflicts that are going on around the world.
Well, can we come to South Africa? Because President Cyril Ramaphosa have had some criticism for being too close to Russia. You know, for the recent comments he made, where he talked about Russia as a friend. Well, Trump is also very friendly to Putin. I don't know if that will persist. You know, and whether they will continue that friendship or mutual admiration that they have. Do you think that it might be a little bit easier going forward for Cyril Ramaphosa because of Trump's association with Putin?
Linda, President Trump has made it quite clear that his first day in the office is actually to remove all sanctions against Russia. So if he removes sanctions against Russia, and the expectation is that we should impose sanctions against Russia, it will be really something that will be very difficult to swallow. And I'm basing this on his pronouncements. Campaign pronouncements and policy articulation are totally different in certain instances. And I think we'd have to wait and see that as he moved into the White House, he's going to remove this sanction. It will be really unfortunate if he were to remove sanctions on Russia and expect other people to impose sanctions on Russia. So that's one area. The other area that people are so much concerned about is this relationship that is developing between China and the African continent. The conflict between China and the US has nothing to do with the African continent. I think African leaders, in terms of the definition of interest, it's changing. In this country, Linda, the automobile sector has been dominated by the Germans and the Japanese. But in the last few years, the Chinese have moved into the market. So it's in the strategic interest of South Africa to protect the automobile industry because it provides so many jobs. It provides better possibilities for export, even export to the United States. So South Africa would have to protect, as part of that strategic partnership, what is emerging coming out of China. And in the same way, South Africa would have to identify its relationship with the Russian Federation and protect what's coming up there. The national interest is not a very narrow and parochial way of, so to say, Linda. It has to do with specific relationship that is engaged with. What is the problem of having better relations with China and having better relations with Russia and better relations with the United States? And the conflict between the United States and Russia is not a conflict between South Africa and Russia. It has nothing to do with the two countries.
So can we talk a bit about the company that you have now? I mean, I've known you for a long time, back to the years of Nelson Mandela as you know, the chief of protocol. So tell us about this company and what you are doing now.
Linda, we risk recon, we're doing a political risk profile mainly focused on the continent. We are looking into the security of the continent. We are looking at the challenges of conflict in the continent. My specialty, as you know, is conflict resolution. That's where I've done a PhD in conflict resolution at the University of Pretoria. So we are really looking into issues of sustainable peace in the continent. But we are also looking at the risks and how this risk can be mitigated before they really evolved into a fully fledged conflict. The continent has been plagued by different conflicts, and no one, Linda, for many years has dared to do detailed analysis about the root causes of this conflict, the sources of the conflict. That's what we're doing, and we're trying to help states and government who are dealing with these areas to identify those issues. We are also trying to provide a risk analysis in terms of the investment in the continent and to any possible clients, but we're also providing what are the opportunities that exist in the continent, in the mining sectors around the continent. So that's what we're trying to do.
So interesting. So can I summarize in saying that you don't think Donald Trump will be a bad thing for the African continent, and it might actually take away the specter of a third world war?
No, I don't think Trump is a threat to international peace and security. But I also think that from Donald Trump, what you see or what you get is what you see, and what you see is what you get. There's nothing hidden from him. He's very outspoken. And I think that's what people fear. They see this person who's such a maverick in terms of articulation of his views. But at least you know where you stand. African continent cannot keep on relying on handouts from around the world, including from the US. When Africa has so much resources, Africa would have to deal with its own challenges that really include corruption, bad governance, and so on. But Donald Trump is outspoken on these issues. And rest assured, he's going to chastise African leaders who are mismanaging their countries, who are mismanaging the wealth of their countries. He'll be outspoken on those issues. So that's the advantage that he brings. But in terms of his foreign policy, we'd have to wait and see what are his policies when it comes to the African continent before we can really judge the man.
Well, Dr. Kingsley Makhubela, so interesting to speak to you again. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Linda. Thanks indeed.